Welcome back, DestinysJesus here. So in this video, I'm going to be breaking down 3 levels of solo cash cups in Season 6. We're basically looking at a beginner player who's got $0 earnings and didn't place too good in the cash cup, a kind of semi-pro players on the uprise, looking at exactly what they're doing correctly to actually go ahead and place really well. I'm also going to be looking as our pro player, MrSavage, Mr. 200 IQ, got 200 points in the first cash cup of the season. This is the players that we're looking at. First is FisherGG's, our beginner players, got $0 earnings, got 99 points, still a pretty decent performance, but you can see after these first 2 games, he really struggled with consistency and actually having good end games. We're looking at what his mistakes are mid game and a bunch of things as well as some off-spawn stuff for you guys to learn from. And then for our semi-pro players, actually a player that's actually kind of important to me, mainly because he got the Solos Masterclass. As you know, that's kind of like my paid course that you guys can get, the Masterclass series, and he actually went ahead and got top 20 as his first earnings, I believe, in competitive. As you can see, he got 19th place. His end games are really consistent. Getting into that top 20 in the 19th spot is really impressive. And as you can see here, from his placements beforehand, before actually getting the Masterclass, really wasn't too good. He got top 100 in this trio cash cup after he dropped down a few slots. He also got like top 1000 in this other trio event. So really not the best placements, and he never really had any good solo placements before this. He has nothing on his PR page. And as you can see, he's went ahead and placed top 20 after getting the Masterclass. And of course, for MrSavage, 200 points, Mr. 200 IQ, we're looking exactly how he was so consistent. 3 wins as well as a load of top 3 placements, which are really important in this current format. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you like if you did. So for our beginner players, actually doing this really good spot that's on his back mountain, basically allows him to get all of the metal in this area. And the good thing with this is you've got a couple of different options. You can either rotate downhill in towards his lake area and fight, or you can just simply rotate up north, get all the beach area as well, and then disengage out. The only downside that's probably bad about the spot for solo cash cups is obviously it's not really the best because you're not really going to have that ability to upgrade, and then also you're going to be quite forced sometimes with bad zones and you'll be able to get a car as frequently as possible. But still, it's a pretty decent spot if you guys want something to try out. It's a little bit more passive, and let's actually go ahead and look at how Fisher takes this fight in a second here. Okay, so he does actually play perfectly around from this elevated position, and he wants to get a beam. Whenever you open your fight, especially in a cash cup where you know the players are a little more higher like quality of players, especially because he's at higher points here, and also this cash cup only had about 12k people actually playing it, so there's a lot of good players since it was a champ only event. You want to make sure that you open every single fight with as big a beam as possible, and especially if you're landing all these kind of scuffed back end spots, he's 120 beam to start the fight. And this is at the point where I think with 120 beam, you could probably just argue about jumping straight in the box, especially the makeshift, you're going to be easily able to one-shot him. But instead, he plays this fight a lot more passively, so he goes on for like another full minute here, and he gives the guy the opportunity to actually go through all of his minis and waste a lot of his mats. Thing is, if you ever get a beam like that, like a good beam like Fisher did, just try committing as quick as possible. Make sure you close the fight as quick as possible. Instead, he takes a long time here just spamming and playing very patiently from above. Pretty good setups, don't really take any too risks of actually going down and dropping too quick on the subs. Always playing from above, spraying and taking piece control. And then when it came down to actually finally committing to the fight, you see it did take quite a while to actually finish that guy off. There's some nice exit control from above, gets another chip tag in, and then here then he finally actually decides to commit in. But the guy's already going through all his heals, and it means that this fight really wasn't too worth it. Obviously he gets the point, but in this format, it's 30 to 1 point ratio for the win compared to actually getting the kill, so wins are way more important. And also, that's the thing, if you get a big beam like that to start the fight, just commit in straight away and try to finish it as quick as possible and be confident in your aim abilities. If any of you guys are interested in some more kind of audio content, I'm going to be uploading a video from Rack Malberg, basically videoing over some of these other games from his cash cup, where he basically go over and look at exactly what he's doing correctly to actually go from placing not really the best. As you can see here, literally only has $500 earnings from the 1 million Super Cup, and then he went ahead and placed in the top 20 in this cup, and before that, really not the best placements. There's some drastic changes he's made to his gameplay from the Masterclass. I'm going to be breaking down exactly what he's been implementing and going ahead and improving to actually get this good placement and get into the top 20. This is a really important part of solo cash cups. I think a lot of players overlook, and it's just making sure you've got good mid-game positioning. Rather than having to rely on late rotates or possibly getting caught up with a lot of other players around that can scuff you going into endgame, always try to make sure you get in a good position early, like Rack Malberg does actually here. See, what he's going to go ahead and do is rotate early enough where he's going to get onto this hill as quick as possible. And again, this is a power position, which basically means it's a really good spot on the map where he has a lot of control, and he can establish map control from here. So you can basically force other players away from rotating into him just because of the fact he's established up in his base. Nobody's going to want to run up this mountain or even build up near him, and he has all this control. Now, the good thing with that control obviously means he has his own area. He can possibly get some storm surge if he needs it, but it means there's a lot of options for things that you can do. So you can come over here, farm up a little bit, makes his rotate into this third zone, trying to center himself on third zone a lot easier because he's the only one on this side of the map. So you can see here, it's a very nice cheap rotate. Then he gets into a spot where you can actually refarm on that brick pretty much perfectly. And now he's in a really good situation in terms of mats and heals, all because that really good power position that you got earlier and establishing that map control. Okay, so our beginner player in the end game, he actually makes a really big mistake that I think a lot of other players make that aren't really at that pro level, and it's just something called inactivity. In a position where you need to get a refresh, and you definitely can get a refresh, you need to be a lot more active in terms of looking for an actual kill rather than just playing really passive. If you do have mats, obviously you can just play a little bit slower, but there's a lot of opportunities here that he could go for a refresh on, especially considering his loadout. Look what he's got. He's got really good heals, he's got a harpoon to drop people down or to just get straight in the box, and he has a jump shotty, primal shotty where you can just instantly kill somebody if he does drop them down. Like this play right above him, that's such a free opportunity for a refresh. That's easily going to be a lot of extra mats that he can go ahead and grab and then keep himself alive, rather than just using all of his current mats and then dying as soon as he runs out, which is actually what he does here. So you can see exactly how inactive he is. He's got loads of opportunities to just harpoon other players down, but instead he just sits in his box, waits a long period of time, waits for zone to pull max, and again, because we've got no movement in the meta apart from the eggs that run this cash cup, he basically just has to ramp rotate. He does a good job of saving mats and being efficient here, doing some really nice kind of EJ type boost where he basically just zooms along. Then as you can see, he gets in towards the end of zone, and this spot is probably just where you should stop and start trying to think about, again, using the harpoon on backside. Try to use your primal rifle to actually kill some of the backside and get a refresh, but instead he just keeps being inactive, staying front side, doing a good job of it, but then he just gets to the spot here where he's kind of got nothing to do. He's on a really high layer, he can't really do anything apart from shoot back, doesn't get either of those kills on the back end as well. And then finally here, because he hasn't got a refresh this entire time, he's forced to drop down to low ground. Again, could have harpooned in there and gone for potential refresh, but instead he just goes the whole way towards low. He's stuck in the spot where he's got absolutely no mats, and at this point, sure, you could jump in a box, that's kind of a 50-50 type play, but you never want to wait for your refreshes too long, because it means that you kind of in a situation like this, you're forced to just play quite scared and wait for an opportunity rather than forcing an opportunity, and he ends up just getting one pumped by a player who needed to kill as well. So the main takeaway there is the fact that you need to actually be a bit more active in terms of going for kills before you need to actually go ahead and you're finally out of mats and then you need that refresh. Always try to find a refresh before you need it. One thing that a semi-pro player Malberg is actually getting really good at is the fact that he's always so active and looking for that opportunities for refreshes when he needs to. So right here you can see he actually gets in, gets a 2x1, and then as soon as he's in this position he starts looking for edits on different players. This doesn't actually result in a kill, but it's just the correct idea to get in the habit of doing in terms of looking for those kills. After missing that opportunity for a kill, instead of focusing anymore, he's still in a good situation mats wise because of how good he played his mid game. He can instead just continue to rotate front side and actually completely avoid fights. So basically what we did there is just take a very low risk fight in terms of just going for an edit from above. As soon as it doesn't work out and he doesn't actually necessarily need the kill, he just continues rotating and he gets the whole way front side. Basically just tarps the whole way in here as front side as possible, and then now he establishes on a little bit of a higher layer, does some nice cheap tarps at the ramp as you can see to save some mats as he comes forward, gets some position, blocks off all the necessary angles. This is really important, preventing you getting one pumped from somebody who's on the mid ground layer and might need a refresh. And then here he simply just finds a refresh on back end, not necessarily a refresh because he's not running harpoon, but still a nice kill to get some siphon back, and that could potentially lead to a refresh later on. The one downside I think of his gameplay is the fact that he's quite passive in game compared to a player like Savage who is really active. It's the fact that right here you could easily get a kill if he's a little bit more aggressive on this, but instead he plays really passively. If you're in a situation like this endgame where you've got good heals, you're also in a really good spot, and you've got a lot of time on zone, you don't necessarily need to move, be a lot more active and actually looking for these picks where possible, rather than just playing a little bit more passively and letting the opportunities kind of miss you. Instead, he does a good job of just making sure he stays alive for as long as possible, pops another egg and then keeps rotating on low ground, basically just avoids all these fights and claims a layer here. Really important concepts in terms of cash cups, understanding how you can claim a layer. So right here he goes the whole way to right hand side on front side of zone, basically on his own layer here and on his own edge of zone. So when all these players on the back end fighting, he's completely safe and he actually forces them all into fighting and dying. As you can see there, all the players on back end are dying and he's just chilling on front side. He's able to play this game very passively. The one thing that I think he messed up here is the fact he did actually convert this into a top 3, but because the fact he didn't get a kill or a refresh this entire time, he didn't really get an opportunity to actually convert this into like a top 2 or a top 1 position, but still a top 3 out of this endgame is still really decent. One of the key differences that I think separates MrSavage from other really top tier solo competitors and why MrSavage is so consistent, he's won the most recent Anaheim, he's also won a cash cup, I'm pretty sure, in the majority of the seasons that have happened so far, and he won the first cash cup of the season. It's just how active he is. He's never in a position where he's sitting there kind of doing nothing, waiting. Even if he's in a pretty good spot in terms of mats and rotation items and everything that he actually needs to do well in a game, he will still be really active and making sure he's looking for opportunities, because every single opportunity that you miss in this game is an extra refresh that could survive you into an extra moving zone. It's a fight that you don't necessarily need to take later on. So if you can take these fights earlier on, go for these impactful opportunities just like he does right here, it means that you can save yourself having to go for these later on. So right here, very simply, he could sure just rotate in, then he'd be playing out an endgame with a flopper, medkit, minis, and actually a decent loadout and 500 mats and probably rotate into a huge zone. But instead he decides to actually go ahead and sit back here on the end of zone, wait for these other players to rotate in, knowing exactly that he's on this choke point, on this cutoff where other players are going to have to rotate through from the edge of force zone into this 50-50, and he gets a really nice opportunity. It's a nice pump from above, and then as soon as he gets that pump, blocks off the necessary angles to the other side and just commits in straight to it. Immediately goes for the W key, gets the wall replaced, sprays through, and gets the elim. Now that elim is just sets him up perfectly for the rest of this game, and there's so many other opportunities for MrSavage does this. Let me go back earlier in this video and I'll show you exactly what I mean. Another example is just like this. He's in a really good situation in terms of being on front side of the zone. He gets the whole way ahead and he has about 400 mats to just keep rotating and playing this endgame out passively. But instead he takes the opportunity to just go for this extra fight, this extra difference maker that can actually win in this game, and ends up resulting in a really good placement here. Just harpooning out this other player, sets up perfect with all the back calls, the cone below, and he does this play quick enough with other players don't realize, then immediately goes for the shot, gets the piece control above. You see actually goes to the floor there as an extra measure. Then he sets up a very simple top right peak and gets a really simple refresh. Little plays like that are the difference maker in between you not doing consistently well in cash cups and you actually going ahead and placing a lot more consistently, just because you find so many more opportunities. Just another quick note on how good MrSavage is going for refreshes. As you can see, he's the whole way on front side of zone, and again utilizing that harpoon in pretty much all of his end games here. He begins scouting through his stairs that allows you to peek through, spots the opportunity with the other player rotating straight above, and because he's on the whole way of front side of zone, is at the most possible point on the zone, he knows that other players are above him are going to rotate exactly over, so he just harpoons out very simply, goes for the shot most importantly, and then the piece control. It's a really important thing to get down in end games, so at least you get that damage advantage if the other player is to trade you back in the rush. Now over here, it's a very simple job of making sure he resets the wall properly, goes through the edit in one motion, and gets a really nice refresh again on another player who's caught unsuspected. The majority of these refreshes that he finds are on the front side of the zone because he puts himself there early enough where he can look back and find those opportunities for kills. This is another really good example from MrSavage in terms of zone positioning and how that can lead to impact kills. So you can see here, he gets the whole way towards front side of the zone, keeps getting ahead as much as possible. Now he's in a position where he actually gets the whole way to front, and look how he actually makes himself completely safe, blocks off all those angles around him. He's in a 2x1, and then he goes for this break on the wall below him. He's probably thinking in the situation, I could easily rotate down there, but he's mainly setting up an exit control play later on that can lead to a kill. So he's basically setting up a preemptive play in a spot where he thinks a refresh might walk by, and he's making sure that it's ready for later on. So he waits very patiently here, has a scout around, have a look at height, realizes it's not really viable at this point because he just needs to get a refresh. And then again, because of how he set up this wall early and he knows the majority of people are going to be on the south side of zone towards this way, just because that's where the zone is widest, she waits perfectly, waiting for this mid-ground player to rotate along, and he spots it. Look how he goes to this wall break from above, immediately does the blueprint edit, so he's basically holding out his blueprint the entire time there to go for this edit from above, gets the refresh, very important to make sure he gets the floppers as well, doesn't bother dropping around bigs or anything, just gets a shotgun upgrade, and then gets out of storm. Perfect play, making sure he gets towards the front side of the zone, then he gets the refresh, and at this point he can start thinking about how he can potentially win the game or convert this into a top 2 position. Now this is something that I think is really important for you guys to understand when it comes to actually placing in cash cups and consistently closing your games out. So rather than just getting to a top 5 or a top 3 position, which is still good points, but consistently winning games, and it's something you need to understand that I got from the masterclass, which is win conditions. Basically making sure you always put yourself in a spot where you're starting to think, in this 9th zone position, how can I convert this game into just an end game where maybe we're trying to take some 1v1s into a consistently winning end game where you can get more wins from a cash cup. You get 3 wins from a cash cup like Savage does here. That is just 90 points off the bat without even any other games which you consistently get end games in. So what are win conditions? Win conditions are basically exactly that. It's a condition that you can go ahead and win the game from. So basically all you need to be thinking about is what in my inventory or my mats, or what weapons do I actually have, or what heals do I have to actually consistently win this game. A high ground on RPG can be a really consistent winning pattern, especially if you play for that earlier in the game. Thinking of how you can execute these win conditions for Savage here is the fact that he has one flopper, only one flopper is perfectly fine, but also he has a lot of mats. One flopper on its own, at this point, we're still a long period of zone, like at least 40 seconds on zone, isn't really enough to win the game, but the one flopper with its extra mats can potentially lead to a game win if you play it correctly, which is what Savage does here, of course. So one thing that he's actually going to go ahead and do is try to go up, actually a look up on height to alleviate some pressure, lets this other player go up, and this is a good thing. He's claiming a layer here, letting this other player actually get pressured by height so he can take this 1v1 engagement. He doesn't necessarily need to take it, but he puts himself in a scuff position here where he's forced to take this engagement, and he basically just wins it behind good pump aim versus the other player trying to use the primal. So he gets to Elim there, again, just make sure he gets all the mats, still thinking about that win condition, doesn't necessarily need the RPG in this situation, but he grabs it for good measure. And then here, what would you do in this situation? Would you go for a right hand peek with a gold pump and try to line up a 100 body shot and potentially risk throwing the game by getting one pumped on a timing shot by that other guy? No, of course not. Instead, Savage plays this perfectly, goes ahead and realizes, I've still got this win condition of that one flopper, I'm going to go up on high ground, secure the actual elevation, and then just play for heal off very simply. I know that other players getting caught out by those old builds, is playing around the mountain, it's going to be quite scuffed, so instead he just sits up on high ground very simply, make sure he doesn't even peek towards the guy, goes for all these builds and make sure the guy's just forced to drop off as he goes up. The other player did a good job of realizing that he's not going to win this game because Savage is playing for heal off, but at that point, because Savage has played for the heal off correctly the entire time, he's basically guaranteed a win there. Another good example of a win condition in these solo cash cups is actually going for height at the correct time. As you can see here, Savage has a bit of a better inventory. It's also earlier in the moving zones. It's not quite towards that 9th zone. So having high ground could definitely lead to a win if zone keeps pulling far like it does in this case. So how does he go ahead and execute this? First of all, he just got a refresh. He's actually pretty stacked on mats. Goes and pops that egg so he can actually rotate a little bit quicker. Gets the whole way to front side again perfectly. Starts ramping up, does some side jumps, kind of messed up his builds a little bit. But again, just going towards front side with an RPG. And at this point, he's pretty much guaranteed this end game because he can just force the other players down. He's got that RPG, he's got a lot of AR ammo, and it's a pretty simple win condition to execute. Get a refresh, then get onto high ground and look for it from the front side of the zone, most importantly. And if you have an RPG, it's just a bonus, where it makes it a lot more simple to hold height. And then Savage is able to convert this. And exactly like that, he just plays on high ground and waits for the opportune moment where he doesn't want to actually force it into a heal off by running back in Storm in case the guy has some kind of heals. So instead he just drops down from an unexpected angle and is easily able to get the victory out. The difference that understanding a win condition in these end games can make to your playstyle is so huge, and that's probably one of the biggest reasons why Savage is so consistent at getting wins in cash cups. Whenever he wins a solo tournament, it's because he gets consistent wins, and the games that he doesn't win, he still gets into a really high placement like 2nd or 3rd, just because he's thinking about those win conditions and how he can execute them.